Hello, it's me, Cooler Jeremy. A few months ago, I was asked to be guest of honor at one of the world's largest furry conventions, FWA, in Atlanta. This was frankly a mind-bending offer, and I absolutely had to take them up on it. The con was last weekend, and I will have a bigger video about my experience there, but for this video, I wanted to show you how I put together the set that I played there on Friday night. Quick aside, if you worked on that live show with me at the con, thank you so goddamn much. You made me feel so much less nervous getting on that stage, and the show looked and sounded amazing. Thank you. When I found out I would be the musical guest of honor and that I would play a set, it really didn't take me long to figure out what I was going to do. Inspired by the way that DJ Joka worked other furry musicians' music into his UK garage set last year for Furality, I decided to put a call out for fandom musicians who would be willing to let me use their stems in a big live remix set. In the end, I whittled it down to 14 tracks from 13 fandom musicians, including my and Aaron's track Instinct from the LEASHES side project. If you want to know more about the musicians I worked with, check the link in the description. Hey, and for those of you who think this is cringe and are asking yourselves, why would a furry be worth making music with? Y'all just don't know how much insane talent there is in this fandom. Every genre is represented with incredible skill and production quality. If you know, you know. What I want to do now is a quick walkthrough on how I put this set together and performed it. So after getting the stems from each of these musicians, each track got its own Ableton session. Here, I did a proof of concept arrangement, seeing how the tracks went as like a house or garage flavored version of themselves. Somewhere in the 125 to 138 range for the most part. The second half of the set flips between 170 and 85 BPM, so we had a different vibe for those. Once the proof of concepts were tight, I baked all the high latency effects into exports and made a master Ableton session where I pulled in the stems from the individual sessions. I used Google Docs to figure out an arrangement of the tracks based on tempo and vibe and key, and then I started placing the stem groups in Ableton to flow together. In the master Ableton set, I created some main group channels to house the stems for each track in. We had vocals, which is self-explanatory, drums, which are drum loops and fills that I couldn't do in the Digitakt easily. We had instruments, which was the most utilized and represented all the instruments from the original tracks I used and any others I needed to add. The Digitakt was doing drums and the Digitone was doing synths, so I didn't really have any other place to put instrumental samples. Next up is effects. This group was a really big reason for using Ableton Live in the set. It can be hard to do risers and drop effects in Ableton because they take a really long time and monopolize channels. The effects group has all the hype effects for the entire set in it, so risers and down sweeps and impacts, all that kind of stuff. The space effects channel is the intro and outro NASA sound collage I used for the set. I like how it says at the end Atlantis, but could very well be heard as Atlanta, which is where the convention is at.
We copy your will stop, and we'll take this opportunity to congratulate you, Atlantis, as well as the thousands of passionate individuals across this great spacefaring nation.
Next, we have a very underutilized basses group, as most of the basses were done in the Digitone 2. A sidechain track, oh my God, that's hard to say. A sidechain track at the bottom has a muted kick drum with all the appropriate patterns for that classic sidechain pump throughout the set. I changed the pattern for tracks at halftime, like the Love You Like a Dog track, and later for the drum and bass tracks like Royalty. For that, I would use a two-step sidechain as opposed to a 4-on-the-floor sidechain. Each track had a kiss of multiband limiting to keep everything in a pocket, and I only used native Ableton effects to keep the latency down as far as possible. Overall, the latency for the set turned out to be 63 milliseconds, and I actually delayed all of the internal Ableton tracks 63 milliseconds late so that the audio coming in live from the Digitakt and Digitone could match up perfectly with them. All right, that leads us to the Electron Tracks. I have one Digitakt 2 audio track in, one Digitone True. God damn it. One Digitone True. I can't say it. Okay. That leads us to the Electron Tracks. I have one Digitakt 2 audio in track, one Digitone 2 audio in track, and 10 Digitone MIDI tracks. The Digitakt 2 audio in track has automation baked into the track for some EQ movements and full muting of the drums. I have my paws plenty full performing the Digitone, Digitakt, and effects. I needed some guardrails to make sure the big moments were perfectly covered. And big moments of silence and their counterparts, the drops, needed to hit just right, and this automation helped with that. All the drum sequencing is happening in the Digitakt 2. It got MIDI clock, and I programmed a pattern for each track. The last track got 2 patterns, and that's because of the tempo switch up halfway through the track. I spent the set muting, unmuting, and occasionally reversing the drum parts on the Digitakt 2. And you might think this sounds like a lame performance thing to do, but it's huge when little changes happen in the drums, and building up patterns like in the track you're hearing now made giant impact on the dance floor. Let's talk about the Digitone 2. I used Ableton to sequence its parts because there would be far too much pattern switching on the unit to make the kind of song structure stuff I wanted to do. I wanted to perform and not babysit pattern changes. I have 10 individual tracks coming out of Ableton via USB. Actually, I guess I should say I'm using the most recent iteration of the Overhub by Electron. I know that there are cheaper options, but I didn't have a ton of time, and I needed something I knew would just work with no issues. I didn't pass my audio interface through it. That was an AudioFuse Studio from Arturia plugged directly into the laptop, but all of the MIDI stuff went through Overhub, and it worked just fine. So yeah, USB MIDI out to the Digitone, and all the parts written in Ableton. The massive track count on the Digitone 2 meant that as I went through writing these tracks, I could add another MIDI track if I needed to get another sound in the mix. But I tried to keep things as condensed and simple as possible in terms of the arrangement, because that, to me at least, is what hits on the dance floor. I mostly spent the set playing Control-All on a low-pass filter. And for those of you that don't know, on the Elektron boxes, if you hold down, like on some of them you hold down track, on some of them hold down function, and when you turn a knob that corresponds to one track's particular thing, like for the low-pass filter cutoff, it actually affects the low-pass filter cutoff for all the other tracks at the same time. Control-All is an incredible performance tool that can do mild things, but also really, really wild things, and it's one of the standout features of the Elektron boxes. So I would write parts that got bigger and brighter with a low-pass filter sweep and carefully Control-All the filter around. Some tracks would use the new FM drum engine for bass, and for those, I would play with the first synth page, specifically the wavefolder settings. But all the settings on that first FM drum page, if you're using it for like a bass, especially like a drum and bass sort of like sine drop bass, can really mess up the sound in a good way. So don't be afraid to play with that. Like write an 808 bass sound, and then like while you're performing, like mess with those settings. It's really good. On one track, I had a section where I played a 303-esque sounding tracks filter on its own. And finally, for the really big tracks that were like already huge and had nowhere to go from a filter perspective, I would Control-All the bit crusher to make them kind of like get really agitated and scream as things got more intense. The final piece of the puzzle was effects. The 3 main group tracks in Ableton, vocals, instruments, and drums, they all had customized effect chains on them. The effects were all the same for each track, but the tolerances and mapping were slightly different for each one, specifically around the bit looper, which loops and degrades the signal. I've done a big video on performance effect mapping that you can check out to know more about this stuff, but basically I started with the ORFX MFX Lite rack, and then eventually sort of stripped it and made my own version of them exactly how I wanted them to work and no more. Those effects are mapped to a Fader Fox, Foxes, PC-12. A massively knobby beast. That's actually my favorite kind of beast. I chose this because it was available without a long wait, unlike the Yaltex controllers, and had far more controls than I needed for this. I used 10 effects per channel, and as you can see, that fit perfectly on each row. Okay, so with all this said, what was I doing during the live set? Well, I could perform beat arrangement changes, muting and unmuting, specifically around like the end of a bar. I could take the kick out for a tiny bit, bring it back in. Big change, sometimes hard to program, it's good. Tamper changes, so builds of the synth sounds, bringing them back down, sometimes playing an individual instrument, mostly it's timbre. And finally, I could manipulate the structure and hype of the mix via effects. Honestly, it was plenty to do on stage. And while I was terrified of having a serious and embarrassing meltdown, the set went pretty much flawlessly. It was amazing. Like, seriously, it was really, really cool. I hope that this was useful information to you. I'll have more to say about the con itself, and I'll definitely be revisiting this hybrid workflow in future sets. But for now, that's all I got for you. Do the like and comment thing to appease the dark goo that lives in the basement of YouTube headquarters. And honestly, kind of has this strangely alluring quality to it. Like if you look at it, kind of feels like it wants you to touch it. No, that can't be right. Should I embrace the dark goo? You hear that whispering? Dad? Okay, bye.
Run out of tricks you taught me. Done wrong behind your back till you spot me. Tilt up between my legs when you caught me. Raw, distraught at my follies, falling out of line with the bet you knew when you routed me like I let you do. When you wound me tight, kept me sucked into count blessings I get used to. I love you like a dog, just train me right. Enough done wrong, even take me rights, but make me jump and I'll say how high, then I'll find how to fly to impress you. I'll offer up my mind to you.